Ennek a társadalomnak nincs joga addig az emberi méltóság sérelmeiért komoly súllyal panaszt tenni, amíg meg nem tanulja, hogy az emberi méltóság egy és oszthatatlan.
Okay, everybody, so I will start the second event. My name is Professor Andrew Ryder. I'm the director of the Institute for Political and International Studies at ELTA. I'm also the co-teacher, organizer of this course being organized by the István Bibó Free University at the Central European University. And my colleague in this enterprise is Professor Balázs Mátény, a colleague who works with me in my institute. Basically, I just want to give you a bit of an overview of what this is all about. We're organizing a series of seminars. We've held a number this semester. I think this is number 6, and we will hold another 7 next semester. We're organizing an ongoing discussion about the future of Hungary, and we're bringing in academics, civil society people from a range of society, and people with a range of different views. And basically, we hope that dialogue will help guide a book that we're working on the future of Hungary. But it's not just about Hungary. We hope to touch upon principles and ideas that are relevant and important to other countries experiencing what we could call a crisis of democracy. Serbia, for example, being one. My own country, United Kingdom, is far from being stable, given some of the challenges that exist there at the moment. In America as well, we see signs of a troubled society. So we're hoping to produce a book that has a wider application than Hungary. Our guests today, let me introduce them. We have, first of all, Eszter Kirs, an associate professor at the Institute of Global Studies at the Corvinus University. And Eszter has an interest in international law, human rights, international relations, and has also written some very important work. I think all of her work is important, but I particularly liked her work on student dissent. I really think I found it exceptionally inspiring. And another person who's inspired me, I'm very lucky to be on this panel tonight, is Krista Kovacs, an associate professor in the Institute for Political and International Studies at ELTA. She is a former senior advisor of the Hungarian Constitutional Court and was former co-president of the Joint Council on Constitutional Justice, the Venice Commission, the Council of Europe. She has major interests in the rule of law and academic freedom, and I think is, again, alongside with Eszter, a lead voice in academia on academic freedom. Finally, we have Zoltán Rónay, who has also inspired me. I've read all their stuff, by the way, so I'm speaking with conviction here. Yeah, he's written some incredibly important stuff, and I think I've quoted him a lot in my writing. Zoltán is an associate professor at ELTA in the Faculty of Education and Psychology. His interests are in the regulation and management of public and private higher education institutions, and he has a major research interest in academic freedom and institutional autonomy. So we've got 3 leading voices on this subject. I think a very, very impressive panel. And we together kind of put our heads together to think up a series of questions, and we've come down to about 4 that we hope will capture the main points of this debate. The first one actually has 2 parts. Let me read them out to you. What evidence is there that Hungary has an academic freedom problem? I think we need to establish, well, is there a problem? What are the facts? Then we're going to go into something a lot more deeper and analytical. Why and how has academic freedom been eroded? Now, before we answer this first question, and I think we can do that quite briefly, what evidence is there that Hungary has an academic freedom problem? What I did was I reread something called the Academic Freedom Index, which makes an assessment of how much a country complies with academic freedom values and practices. In the list of 171 countries, Hungary was ranked 126, one place behind Libya. It was put in the bottom 20 to 30%. In that grouping, Libya, Vietnam, Uzbekistan, no other EU country is in that category. Of course, we will also be aware that the European Union has deep concerns about what we call foundation universities, and to express its concern, it has ruled that foundation universities cannot access the Erasmus Mobility Programme or Horizon research money. So that's some evidence. Some would say substantial evidence, but let's ask the panel if they want to add to that.
I mean, here we could come up with an overall view about what has happened from 2010, right? I mean, and any of us could summarize what's the problem with academic freedom in Hungary. I don't know, should I be the one? Just briefly, and then you can add whatever you think is important. So basically, if we just think about the current political system, so from 2010, then major cornerstones of erosion of academic freedom, including institutional academic autonomy, has been, like in 2014, the introduction of the chancellor system. So when still senates had the decision-making power, but chancellors had mandate to overall control over financial affairs. And then when the model change came in 2019 and 21, almost all Hungarian universities who used to be public universities were transformed into a foundation-based system, but you might want to tell more about that, Zoli or Krista. But before that, there were major updates, other major updates too, like whatever happened with the gender studies, and that the canceling the accreditation of the gender programs was a major hit to social sciences and the pretty much politicized move. Also, we can think about the obvious case of the Central European University and how it was kind of chased out of the country through the Lex EU. And then the model change. I shouldn't be long in my first intervention, so I'm not going to summarize. Maybe you want to continue. But all in all, I think to really go to the substantive problems, in my subjective view, you might put it that way, is that when it comes to institutional autonomy, academic self-governance, we have major issues. So basically with the model change, the decision at the model change universities, decision-making power and authority of the Senate were seriously cut. And then in many cases, even representative members of the senates were marginalized, who represented autonomous units of these universities and not representing the management. Then a very strong managerial perspective was brought into the system, like going for internationalization, high-ranking positions, and then unilateral decisions coming from top management in order to achieve those management-related goals. And then real, genuine involvement into a democratic kind of decision-making process ceased to exist in many of the cases. And but when it comes to individual academic freedom, there I don't see that kind of overall problem. So even at the Model Change University, self-censorship is a much bigger problem than frontal censorship. And so even at Model Change Universities, we can teach usually whatever we want, we can research whatever we want. One thing is there, you don't want to go, if you don't want to face even governmental persecution, you don't want to go to broader public in a sense that you don't want to talk to media channels or act on the political stakeholders, opposition political stakeholders, that would come with a potential broader political impact, because then you need to face persecution. And last sentence, because really I should give the microphone to you and you should continue. To me, the major problem is also culture, our culture, and the individual's awareness and consciousness about what the individual responsibility is in this whole problem. And to raise awareness about the significance of academic autonomy, self-governance, and the responsibility of individual academic people to contribute to the common fight for academic freedom, because there we have a lot to do in awareness raising and triggering collective action and solidarity. I hope I managed.
Thank you very much. So first of all, I think it would be important to emphasize, if we talk about academic freedom repressions from a political perspective or overall perspective, because academic freedom can be restricted not only by the government or the state, it can be restricted by the autonomous university management as well. So in many countries, including Hungary, if the autonomous university management forces the academic community to research certain topics instead researching other topics, it's also an infringement of academic freedom. Of course, illiberal or authority countries like Hungary can use this label or purpose, I mean the productivity, internationalization, or something like that, to realize or make possible the political intentions. But if we think about Hungary, I guess the first thought we have is the political repressions. Just for a second, going back to the question about evidences, I would say that it's a very tricky thing in Hungary, because is it not the country as other countries where the academic freedom restrictions are clearly regulated? Researchers must face imprisonment or the possibility of imprisonment. It's a bit different. What Eszter said, the atmosphere is a key, and the self-censorship, because the regulatory framework not really offers clear repression of academic freedom, but lacks the guarantees of academic freedom, which offers a broad moving space for the university, for the state, and state delegated university managers. In terms of state universities, the chancellors; in terms of model change universities, the board of trustees of the maintainer foundation. So these are the factors which can create an atmosphere where all the researchers can consider if they want to face the unofficial consequences like the propaganda media attacks and whatever. Just to make a comment on this, you know, especially who are from Hungary, we have the Sovereignty Protect Office. I guess it is the English name, but they don't have English website, so I don't know what is the what the official English name is. So the Sovereignty Protection Office every month or every second week lists all the project or all the ways which can threaten the Hungarian sovereignty. Among them, they list all the European Union funded projects like Erasmus or something like that as a from abroad financed influential project which has the purpose to, I don't know, destroy the Hungarian national something. I don't know, because it makes no sense. So among these projects, for example, I'm very proud of this because my project is among these kind of projects. It's the Erasmus Key project. So it means I should consider if I want again this kind of project and I want to see my name on this list. My name is actually not on this list because these guys were a bit superficial, so they changed persons, but it's the main purpose is not the truth. The main purpose is to feel uncertain if what comes, you know. So this is the atmosphere. And so we had research with my colleague, also from the Corvinus University, Gergely Kovács. We made it for the CEU Global Observatory of Academic Freedom. It is the Academic Freedom in Hungary. It's a short book. And then we have some evidences about the erosion of academic freedom because we conducted a qualitative research, conducted 31, I guess, interviews. And it was very, how can I say, not surprising, but not shocking as well, but sad to read the interviews answers that many of our colleagues from all over Hungary think that their academic freedom is somewhat infringed. And the main issue they mentioned was the self-censorship. So, you know, this is, and self-censorship has a big latency, and you cannot realize, even the person who practices self-censorship sometimes doesn't realize that it is a self-censorship. So this is what this kind of power wants to achieve, an atmosphere where the researchers, the academic community step back and try to not fight against the state powers, intentions and goals.
Thank you. So let me add something to what happened and then how did it happen. Between 1989, so between the democratic transition and 2010, basic research were carried out by public universities on the one hand and research institutes on the other. That was the structure in Hungary. And what happened and what's the problem today is that this system has been completely eroded since 2010. First, there is no independence in the so-called managed universities under this public foundations, because the members of the board are appointed by the government, but that's just one reason. So there is no independence. Research institutes were forcibly separated from the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and now is in a forced marriage with Eszter. That's the second. And third, the remaining public universities like Eszter, where we are right now, is seriously and extremely underfunded. So weaponizing the budget is the third problem. I think that explains the result you mentioned, Andrew. And how did that happen? Zoltán mentioned that it's a bit different in this country than in other countries. Softer. Let me put it this way. Why? I have an explanation. I'm not sure that that's the explanation, but how I explain this is the following. Last year, together with Janika Spanagel, we published a special issue on academic freedom, and in this we try to explain what the liberal science script is about. And we defined it as something that is embedded in a system of individual autonomy and collective self-government. And we imagined that it lies between two illiberal extremes. One extreme is when the science is fully subordinate to politics and or economy or economical interest. And the other is the other extreme is when, in the name of absolute academic freedom, anti-expert sentiments and pseudoscience emerges. And today, I think autocrats attack academic freedom from both sides. So both they use the good old authoritarian techniques. You mentioned that they ban certain disciplines like gender studies in Hungary or anthropology in Poland, and they also dismiss scholars. So these are the techniques that they used in the history as well. But they also use new techniques, and it has to do with the thing that they have to pretend that they are democracies. So they don't abolish the vocabulary of a democracy. They use the words or the terms democracy, free speech, and academic freedom, but they radically redefine the way they use. So they mean utterly different when they say the word academic freedom. Let me give you two examples. Both examples are from Hungary. The first one is, in the name of more academic freedom, they support pseudoscience. Probably you remember, you remember that the Orbán government closed historical research institutes like the 1956 Institute and the Georg Lukács Archive, among others. But they set up new ones. They established new ones, and one of them is the Institute of Hungarian Studies. And the task of this institute is to prove that the descendants of the Hungarians is the Huns and not the Finno-Uralic tribes. And the Hungarian language is a member of the Turkic language family and not the Finno-Ugric language family, as linguists hold. So, and the other example is the Matthias Corvinus Collegium. You know, this is an institute that is established and lavishly funded by the government, and it's spreading internationally. It also has a Brussels branch, and recently its Brussels branch attacked the European Union in the name of academic freedom, saying that the Jean Monnet chairs are propagandists because they are sending this pro-European message. So all in all, what I'm saying is that they attack academia from both sides, and they use new techniques these days. And that's why, probably because they pretend to be democracy.
Thank you for that. So we presented some evidence. We've given a pretty thorough overview, I think, of how academic freedom has been undermined or eroded, one could say. Zoltán started to touch on the why when I think he was talking about the self-censorship of academics. And I'd like to go a bit deeper into the why. What is the motivation of the government in weakening academic freedom?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like we can talk about the culture war, we can frame it as such, which expert colleagues, political scientists who are exploring the nature, fundamental nature of the liberal system and right now electoral autocratic system of the Hungarian political system. They claim that this is like, I don't know, like the fourth wave of the development of this illiberal regime. And so that targeted not only universities and academic freedom, but obviously culture. And one example, very eclatant example for that was also related to academic freedom through this SFA when we saw major and very loud and visible good, thank you, to repress dissent. And so I think it's very clearly demonstrated by the reaction of political power on protest movements related to academic freedom and educational affairs. And I would also, through that, continue a little bit and follow up on what kind of tactics are there and what kind of phenomena in radicalization in the response of political power on protests in this sector. And we can see evidences for radicalization. So when we are talking about soft tools, then obviously one part of the picture is propaganda, which from the Serbian perspective, Emilia, also discussed character assassination, all kinds of marginalization and discrediting techniques appearing even in public media, which is not supposed to do that job, but supposed to provide balanced information. And so what we see that if we look at student protest movements from 2010, then from the very beginning, it's present. So in media outlets appearing framing techniques that result in not only marginalization, but discrediting of the protest movements. And so it's not only about individual character assassination, but it's also about discrediting the movements as a whole, as if these protesters were non-autonomous entities far from legit citizens who are advocating for legit reforms needed in the education sphere and the academic sphere, but they are puppets of internal and external enemies, let it be Brussels or Gyurcsány or Péter Magyar, Ukraine, UFOs, whoever. And so, but what I want to point out that apart from the fact that by now it's clearly identifiable what kind of discrediting techniques are applied by the governmental propaganda, like ridiculing the protest events, focusing on the decadent and unlawful and sometimes violent characteristics of protesters in order to steal the attention from public concerns that were allegedly raised by the protesters, but also using authentic information in a biased way. So let's say interviewing a mother of a child who is protesting and who is worried to death that this child is manipulated by larger enemy forces and now put to risk by this evil protest movement. So all these kind of techniques appearing in the media. And if we look at the texts in these media outlets and articles, they are growing harsher and harsher, more and more radical in the tone, in the language. But one thing I wanted to point out when we talk about the soft, so-called soft character of persecution in this sector, actually it turned hard at a certain point. And based on my research by now, what I see that around 2022, there was a shift in that. And that related to actually not academic freedom, but education affairs in secondary education, when we had students from secondary schools protesting. And as far as I see through lawyers' eyes who are representing protesters in all kinds of petty offense cases and also criminal cases now, that from 2022, the new persecution appeared through criminal law. So in 2022, there were a number of criminal procedures which were initiated against student protesters under the guise of alleged criminal procedures related rhodes, so disorderly behavior, violation of the rules of peaceful assemblies, and all these kinds of violence against public officials, the police. So all the phenomena that Emilia also talked about. And what I see so far, that the prosecution services are playing a very tricky game, that they are playing with law before the case gets to the courts. So for example, in 2022, a tactic was that when the criminal procedure was started, there were all kinds of investigations of the student protesters at the police, and then the prosecution services after months came up with an offer. We suspend the criminal legal procedure. There might not be a court hearing. You won't be convicted if you sit silent for 1 year, because according to the law, for 1 year, the criminal legal procedures are suspended, but that's enough time to have the chilling effect. All the students who were targeted by this understandably accepted the offer of the prosecution services. So the cases never went to the court. They could never prove that actually the suspicion and the charges were absolutely illegit and had no real so justification, acceptable justification, and no evidences. But they opted for this for existential reasons. I mean, obviously, this is a better deal, not to be facing a potential judicial decision of conviction at the end of the criminal legal. But for 1 year, if you are again involved in these kind of activities, then the criminal legal procedure is restarted, and you have a second one for the current incident. So double jeopardy you're in. And so that's one of the eclatant examples how actually there are hard tools already for persecution of protests. It of course continued with the current protests in 2025 related to the Pride ban, but this does not fall within the subject matter of this discussion. But so we see a radicalization of the political power here.
So I guess just one comment on what Eszter said, because the issues with academic freedom is not are not isolated phenomena. Academic freedom insults connecting to a broader aspect. So when a state or the state power start to reduce the freedoms, all the freedoms, the citizens' freedoms, of course, one of the main targets is the academia and of course the academic freedom, but not one and the only. So what Eszter said was a bit far from the academic freedom because related, I mean, when we mentioned the soft pressures, I guess these kind of examples weren't related directly to academic freedom, but was absolutely enough to add more elements to this atmosphere I mentioned. And you can feel in Hungary, not at the university, but in Hungary in general, that is better to stay silent, not to fight against the state, not to have an individual and different opinion. You have to do your job. probably there is lots of interesting scientific novel areas, artificial intelligence. You can conduct research on that field, and you have to forget the gender, LGBTQ, migrant, whatever topics. So this is, so you can, and of course, many of the touched people have family. So if you are an academic who had to consider this academic freedom issue and your children is attacked by the police, you can connect it, even if it's not was the direct intention of this power, but you will connect it together and you will consider everything. So, but going back to why, I guess we have to start with the original mission of the science and higher education, which is make everything questionable. Otherwise, nothing will develop. So the core nature of the science and the academic arena is from a certain point fighting against the existing power. It doesn't mean only the state power, but means everything. And the natural science always make questionable everything. Otherwise, they cannot have new research findings. So, but it is very irritated for a power, because it means we try to think critically, we teach or educate our students to think critically, and they will find evidences that the government is lying, the government is cheating, that is not true, they manipulate the data and whatever. So therefore, this is, I guess, the main reason that these kind of powers don't like science and academic. But there is another interesting thing. If you would have asked the government-related researchers or the government-related politicians around 2010, if the academic freedom was under attack in Hungary, they would say yes from left. It's a very typical thing. Think at the United States. All what is happening in the United States is happening in the name of academic freedom. They said it's time to have academic freedom for the right scientists. The right scientists are under pressure by the leftists. So, you know, they fight for academic freedom. So therefore, they can use academic freedom as a weapon against academic freedom. But it's of course, it's a trick. It's a very good trick for people who don't really know anything about academic freedom. I mean, the basic voters, sorry for saying that. So they can say, you know, okay, Trump and the Trump administration step a bit higher because they started to target not only the social sciences and humanities, but everything, climate change, mRNAs, and whatever, vaccines. But in Hungary, they still stayed at the social and human sciences. But you know, from my faculty, psychology is also under attack. So my colleagues who work with drug policies, they can say they are under attacks. They have been under attack since 2010. And what Krista said, Matthias Corvinus Collegium has a drug researcher institute. There are some not acknowledged drug researcher, psychologists, social scientists, lawyers, and whatever, and you will be surprised, they have findings which prove the government drug policy. They are not too many. The majority of the scientists in this field say it's absolutely a dead end what the government does. But there are some scientific evidences in the hand of the government saying that no, it is not just policy, it's just science, you know. So therefore, and when we say it is not science, okay, you are on the left and you fight against the right, the conservative scientist. Maybe next week or this week, the Matthias Corvinus Collegium has a double book introducing event. It's a very genius author, Gergely Szilvai, has already published 2 books. I'm very jealous of him. One of is about Balázs Orbán, who is the political director of Viktor Orbán. They are not relatives. So his PhD defense of this story. The second is more interesting because it's just few propaganda. So if you read the title, you will know this is propaganda. But the second one is how the progressive scientists repress the conservatives. So this is something I don't know the title exactly, but it is about the academic freedom. So you know, this is the answer. They have double goals. First, domesticate the science and the universities. Second, force this arena to give enough space these kind of politically based so-called science, pseudoscience, and one of these tools, these pseudo institutions, Veritas, and there are lots of no one knows what they for. In the reality, okay, they are propaganda institutions, organizations, and to appear around the leftish or the opposition scientists, even at the universities.
Yeah, pseudoscience flourishes in non-democracies. Maybe we can talk about it later, but first let me answer Andrew's question of why, and I agree with Zoltán that for that we have to go back to the purpose of university, and with that to the 19th century, because that's when the modern university we understand today emerges. We connect it to Wilhelm von Humboldt and his concept of science, which connects higher education teaching and research on scholarship, if someone uses the American term for that. And what is interesting here in this modern university is that here intellectual inquiry is not constrained by a central authority. Before, in the Middle Ages, universities were controlled by the church, by the Catholic Church, and their professors studied and interpreted authoritative text, but they didn't have the possibility to do this intellectual inquiry independently. So the Age of Enlightenment brought us the idea that the role of the university, as Zoltán mentioned, is to encourage critical thinking, and it's dangerous because that means that the misuse of power can be corrected, and also it can contest scientifically invalid truth claims. So that's why the universities are natural places for dissent, and it's inconvenient for the power, and that's why autocrats don't like universities, and they usually explain or stresses that the main point of having a university is basically nation building. I remember there was a point when the peace government in Poland stressed that historiography is there to unite the nation and not and rather than follow an academic evidence-based or reason-based discourse. And there is nothing new in this. I mean, during the French Revolution, there was already a debate between Robespierre and Constant Condorcet about the purpose of education. And Robespierre argued that teaching the religious obedience to the laws is the purpose of the national education. And it was Condorcet who said, no, the teaching people to use their own reason is the very reason of having national education. So I think here we are, that the debate is the same, what we have today.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, you know, as a researcher interested in this topic, I've looked at a number of countries where academic freedom has been under threat, and historically as well. And one of the things you notice is the public doesn't really rise up in a big way, raising the alarm or being concerned. It's quite easy for governments in the present and in the past to push academia around and cut back its freedoms. So kind of makes me wonder if there's a long, you know, this problem is a sort of one that's been a long time in the making. Do we need to fundamentally rethink about universities' relationship with the public? How can we connect with the public and market ourselves, for want of a better word, to ensure that when we are attacked, the public is more sensitive and governments think twice about doing it? I don't know if all of you want to, that's a sub question really, but if any of you have got a point on that, reconnect and to the public. I mean, maybe I should answer that question. I mean, part of my work in civil society before I became an academic was I was working for Gypsy Roma Traveller NGOs, and I was working with academics to find ways to involve what we call experts by experience, the Roma community itself, in the research. So we involved them in the research design, the data collection and the interpretation. And we thought that was some way in which we could break down this ivory tower notion of academia. I mean, I think academia does do an incredible job, and it feeds into innovation and opens up so many opportunities. Perhaps we just need to tell the public in a more coherent way, look, this is what we're doing. But of course, we often do get demonized. You know, there are quite big stereotypes about academics now, certainly in politics. But this is kind of leading me to, I mean, we've looked at the problem and how it came about. Let's start thinking about how the problem can be fixed. And we can talk about Hungary, but we can talk about higher education in general, because I think there are problems globally now for academia. So how can academic freedom be protected? How can it be restored where it's been cut back? What changes need to happen? That might be law change. Do we need more legal protection? Do we need improvement in funding, the way we organize internally? Does that need to change? Has it become too commodified, which some people claim? Are we working too much under an audit culture? So thinking about change.
I stick to the Hungarian context, okay? In some comparison with, I'm always looking at Amelia. I mean, right now, us in Hungary, I mean, we see so many parallels with Serbia. And so we tend to compare our stories with yours. And so I might include some perspectives on that. So I think that right now, and yes, we can talk about the global phenomenon of argumentation on the university should be a neutral space, a space for professional training. It should strive for professional goals. It should not be a space for political debate. So this is a global problem that university citizens and communities face. But when we are living in an autocratic context like the one in Hungary or in Serbia, I think a key question is whether in university spaces, the broader problem, the macro problem related to the lack of rule of law, the lack of real democracy, problems related to human rights, and so on, how far the academic communities advocate for changing that. And so, I mean, I obviously insist on my perspective on protest movements, which I explored through research, so I can be kind of credible, I hope credible person, but I'm sure that many claim that I'm not, but still. So if we look at the student protest movements in Hungary, especially in comparison what we see in your case in Serbia, it's very interesting to see this anti-political character of our movements. So student protest movements insisting on where, and that, of course, these movements include also professors protesting against changes in the academia. This insistence on, we are just talking about academic affairs. This is our field. In this field, we have a legit position. We are the ones impacted of whatever happens here. So we are just restricting ourselves to address the problems in the academia. And that's a very conscious communication strategy. And partially it's based on identity building based on internal democratic decision-making processes. So what we saw already in the the student network in the very beginning of the Orbán regime, that it was based on democratic forum decision-making processes to come to a conclusion that, yes, we're going to keep refrain from mobilization for political change. And so I believe that this is a dead end. Since if the macro problem and the broader problem related to political change is not solved, then actually this sector of academia will get into a more and more challenging, difficult position. And so what we see in Serbia, students bravely addressing corruption and the harm caused to people by corruption and the very nature of the autocratic political system, that's something like a model from this perspective. Now, if we look at the Hungarian protest movements in academia, we see developments in that regard, by the way. So what we see that in the very beginning with the student network, it was also embedded in a different era. It was the very beginning of the development of this whole regime. Many people questioned whether there will be a really undemocratic turn. Many people still hope that it's not going to go that radical, illiberal, and autocratic. But this is also a key for mobilization for this protest movement. So they made a conscious decision to refrain from addressing illiberal tendencies, because we already had that with the media law, with the change in the constitutional legal system, and so on. First, it would have been very difficult to explain to average people why it's a problem that the Constitutional Court's authority is restricted. This is super abstract for average people. But second, also, many people did not believe that Hungary will take such a radical turn in autocratization. So actually, mobilization for the protest movement for academic affairs would have been more difficult to go for mobilization for political change as well at that very beginning of this era. But if we compare that with the Free SFA 2020, so 10 years already in this regime, and everyone already clearly saw what are the tendencies. And there we already see the sign of opening up for broader affairs. Like, so that very famous mass demonstration that the Free SFA people organized on the 23rd of October in 2020, when they had the 71-day university blockade at the SFA. there they put on the agenda broader issues like discrimination, medical care, problems in the medical care system, healthcare system, corruption as well, the illiberal character of the political system. So there were broader issues opened up in the protest organized by the academic resistance community. And that was a change. But the thing is, and we never know how far the Free SFA could have gone without the COVID. So even there, the COVID was, at its peak. And still the students maintained their blockade at the university. They organized this protest, more than 30,000 people attended, which was a high number at the time of the COVID. But at the end, they had to give up, and they decided to give up the blockade itself and protest activity because they did not want to take the responsibility for any casualties related to the COVID just because of their protest activities. So that's a very particular situation where there were objective circumstances which actually contributed to the dissolution of the movement itself. And we never know how far that movement could have gone, but I'm convinced that, and I was very much inspired in Belgrade a few weeks ago when I went for a conference to your faculty of political science, to an excellent and super inspiring conference on autonomy and resistance. And I was so much inspired that I think it was the vice dean of the faculty who spoke up at the opening of the conference and very straightforward talked about the fact that university space should be a space for open democratic debate about political issues, and if needed, it should be a place of resistance. I was like, it would never happen at Hungarian universities. Official representative of the university management coming up with such speech. It has huge strengths and is a very great example and a model for management attitude, encouraging universities to go back to their genuine social function in addressing broader political and social affairs. So I think this is one key to also trigger broader solidarity by the population that is happening in Serbia. You need to address broader political and social issues, not just academic freedom and academic autonomy.
I want to say something about why we didn't have or don't have a massive resistance. And I have an idea how can we solve this problem from a broader perspective, not only in terms of Hungary. Probably it won't help Hungary, but we mustn't be selfish. So the reason can be, I guess, which is a big difference comparing to Serbia, that in Serbia, as far as I know or I could follow, this tragedy created community. And what we don't have is community. So the academic community is not a national or even not a university level community. It's very, very fragmented. I have personal experiences at this university. So when the chancellor system was introduced, no one among the academics, okay, there were exceptions, but the in charge academics, no one said a word against it. They said, okay, it will be dangerous, but it's okay. And it had personal consequences on the then serving university management members. And from my personal experiences, only one dean rose her said against it. I had to mention it because it was this faculty's dean among 8 other persons. And I guess she was the only female dean. She was the only one who said it's not okay. The others said nothing, you know? So this is the problem. It was it's very beginning. And when the when the gender studies thing happened, which affected only 2 universities, CEU and Delta, this faculty, the other universities stayed in silence. When the CEU case happened, the other universities, the conference of the Hungarian rectors, stayed in silence, you know, so we don't have community. When the Hungarian Academy of Science issue happened, then a bit more people said something, but you know, how many was there on in the protest movement? 20,000, or the biggest protest in terms of academic freedom or autonomy was the CEU protest with 100,000 people. You know, so it means that the people tried to survive somehow and always thought, okay, it's not my problem. So your social science is under attack. It's not my problem. I'm a medical science. According to our research with Gergely, in terms of academic freedom in Hungary, the hard scientists said academic freedom is just an excuse for the researchers, social scientists, researchers whose performance is not that it was required, you know? So this is how this kind of person could think. I hope that after 5 years it changed, but I think this is how this kind of anti-freedom movement of the government could be so successful that they always targeted only one part of the society. So I guess not the academic freedom, the issue, because of the people should have gone to the streets, but what about the healthcare system? What about, you know, so there are lots of all the society directly affecting problems, and the people stayed in silence. So the second one, I guess, we cannot trust the governments independently of the current status of a government if the government will always engage with academic freedom. So therefore, it would be very nice if the national level of legislation would protect academic freedom. But I would say, because I'm engaged with this idea as a working group member of the Council of Europe on academic freedom, to create an international level legal instrument to protect academic freedom. And if these kind of countries like Hungary won't take care of the international treaties, because we know that the government can say that they don't care of the Strasbourg court's decision, but the other countries can be probably protected from the negative turnouts of the governments. In Poland, in Czech Republic, in Slovakia, and all over in Europe, where the trends are constantly getting worse and worse.
Okay, let me be forward-looking and focus on the restoration of academic freedom in Hungary. How can we restore academic freedom? And I'm talking about the legal aspect. This is what I have some expertise. So imagine that we are in the next year, I mean after April, and after a regime change. So what we can do, how can we restore academic freedom? And I think what first we should do is to emphasize that Hungary's legal system is embedded in a transnational legal system. First and foremost, the EU, but not just the EU, also the European law system. And therefore, we have to comply with those requirements that are published by the Venice Commission. Venice Commission has 3 opinions that touched upon academic freedom and higher education. And also the European Parliament has many resolutions. You mentioned the CEU case of the Court of Justice. So there are judgments and there is soft law. There are soft law measures, and I think that full compliance with these with this European law is the first point. The second, which by the way can help us argue that we need to change the law of national education because of that. You know, that because the transnational law requires that. Second, I think we should restore the full autonomy of the self-governing bodies of the still independent public university, so the Senate of this university. Second, I would require the so-called managed universities or the third, to go through a re-accreditation process. And in order to acquire re-accreditation, I think we should ask them to have a new Senate election and a new rector election. So basically to restore autonomy and self-governance. And last but not least, I would cut the funding of those bogus institutions we have already mentioned, Matthias Corvinus and the others. So let's see, what do you think?
Sorry, because of the model change, so the main issue is with the model change universities, that the Board of Trustees has unlimited power. It's very extreme in a legal system, but they have an unlimited power. They can do what they want, you know, the law. So therefore, yes, the ultimate thing, I guess, we have to change the Higher Education Act and control and limit the Board of Trustees' power. So this is the first and most important thing, because otherwise they can do anything. So the second is we have to rethink all this system. We have to re-regulate the Board of Trustees operation, how the members can be a member and so on. So I don't think that the fact that a foundation can maintain a university's bad itself, but how in the Hungarian law it is regulated, it's extreme and it's crazy. So it's not legal. I guess it's absolutely against the rule of law idea. But I believe, I guess not from the CEU case. I think a couple of years before it started the trend, and I think we achieved that many years ago, when I can say Hungary is not a rule of law country anymore, because all the Venice commissions, many of the Venice Commission's indicators which shows a country is a rule of law country or not is missing in Hungary, or are missing in Hungary. So this is, so I think, but it's only one element, of course, because it would be more important to have a new constitution. But if we don't have an amendment on these parts of the fundamental law of Hungary, because there are lots of unprofessional regulations in terms of academic, not only, unfortunately, not only in terms of academic freedom, the whole is, it's not a masterpiece, let me say, but in terms of academic freedom and institutional autonomy, it must be re-regulated. The Higher Education Act is also would be, I would see it rather in the rubbish corp, and we need a new Higher Education Act. But if we compare the three Higher Education Acts from 1993, 2005, it is very visible how the rights of the scholars has been limited, has been reduced. So there are a single word about the research and the autonomy, of course, and only very few words are about the education rights or the right of the educators. You know, if you compare the 2005 law or the 1993 law, there are sections about this. So, you know, this is very visible. I think it's an evidence how the government and the Hungarian state relates to these values. And I think they don't think that are values.
Me too. I asked permission from Andrew to add something to that. And So I'm a lawyer, so I guess officially I should go on with the legislative framework. But frankly, I have the belief that if we have a changing government, a changing political system with all the wonderful legislative and institutional changes, I mean, I don't think that paradise would come and critical thinking would thrive at the universities and democratic debates intensely appearing in university spaces, because for that legislative and institutional changes are not enough. We need a change in culture. And then I go back to the community issue and the current state of communities, academic communities at universities. Just some questions. If you ask your students, for example, how many of them know what academic freedom means and what it entails with regard to the rights and responsibilities of students? Do they know? Some of them. Krista, don't be that optimistic and look outside of your hub, because you are very lucky to be in such a wonderful, inspiring hub. But if you want to have a broader picture, and we are sitting here, I don't know, like max 30 people. So it's a very limited number of people. So if we look at the university communities at all kinds of faculties, right, and all kinds of institutes, not only social sciences, I would be very surprised if like more than 10% of the students would know what academic freedom means and what kind of specific rights do they have and responsibilities in that regard. Also, I would wonder if you ask your colleagues from other institutes and non-social science related institutes, what do they think? What is the responsibility and task of their representative sitting in the Senate? What should they do? Should they inform their own institutes or departments about what's going on in the Senate? How? Should they ask for their opinion? Should they report back in a detailed way about the Senate sessions? Because I'm sure that the majority of Senate members, elected Senate members at universities, do not do that. I'm doing that as a elected member of our Senate, but I'm sure that many of my colleagues don't do that. So the key issue about representation and about individual consciousness about what kind of rights but also responsibilities academic freedom and autonomy and self-governance means, that I take the time, I take the energy, that I read the news about what's going on about the new ethical code, the employment regulation, affairs that a regular member of the academic community think that, oh, I don't have time for that. I need to deal with my academic research, my own research and teaching. And it's not true. We should have conscious university citizens keeping an eye on what's going on with public affairs, because in many cases, colleagues don't even know how academic autonomy is infringed and violated by in many cases, the university management itself and not even boards of trustees. So we need that, and we need to have a dialogue on, okay, how can we build communities? How can we change the culture when it comes to genuine democratic practices in university spaces? We need to talk about, okay, are official representative bodies sufficient to really represent the interests? For example, the HUC, the student union, the official representative body of students, are they sufficient to represent student interest in each and every issue? No, they are not, by the way. And they can be very easily manipulated by university management and have all kinds of background deals. So we need also informal, bottom-up built communities and have all kinds of community engagement in the management of public affairs or academic affairs. Give you an example. I don't know how it's at the ELTA, but for example, when there's a change to a specific training program at my university, of course, the HUC is having a representative in the education committee, so maybe that person can say something, but maybe that person, student representative, does not even belong, is not affiliated into that program, so doesn't have the competence to have a critical view on what's done to that education program. So we should have then the proper representative from the students of that specific program, critically assessing what's going on with their program so that they have the competence and they have the genuine legitimacy and representation. There are more progressive ways for that as well, like community budget and all other kinds of progressive ideas for how to build community and democratic practices. But I mean, I'm not here to list all of them. But we need to have this changing culture, because right now it's true, we don't have solidarity, and we are communities, non-communities, whose units can be very easily manipulated, and we can be turned against each other by the university management, and we need to work on that. That's true.
Sorry. Just I wanted to say that I totally agree with you, Eszter, but I think what we said with Krista and what you said, between them, we don't have a or connection, it is and connection. And my concern is that the legal development would be much more faster than what you said, because it's education. We have to need the organizational culture, which has a root in the, I don't know where, but hundreds of years ago, or at least 500 years ago, or back, and we have to educate, so the minority, let me say, who understand and see the problems, must educate the majority. Otherwise, yes, what you said, none of my colleagues know, and it's too much, I guess, about academic freedom, because I always talk about it. But when I ask my international students what academic freedom is, not 10%, 1% is whoever heard about this concept, and not only from who came Asia or Africa, even who came from Europe and the United States, which is crazy. So, you know, so this is a global problem, but we is a very bad shape in a global problem.
Yeah, we're gonna open it up now, I think, to a wider discussion. What we have to do when you answer a question, kind of repeat the question to you, because we cut the questions from the audience out to make a video just focused on you. I think that's the procedure. Well, we talked a lot about Serbia. Emilia, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, yeah, there is so many similarities, and like the thoughts in my head was like, oh my God, this is the same thing in Serbia. This happened also. Actually, when protests started and when professors joined us, they supported us. It was a hard job, maybe not at Faculty of Political Science, but at other faculties, it was really hard. And then at some point, because we didn't have classes, courses, exams, anything, the government decided to not pay the professors at all. So they changed the law, and actually before the protest, they received 60% of their pay is working with students and 40% research. And after the protest, they were like 90% working with students, only 10% research, and they received only 10% of their pay, which was really nothing. That was the form of punishment that they also received. And of course, for the councils and the other like student and the bodies inside the faculties, they were also manipulated and controlled by the government. And as a student, I must say that the student representatives who was involved in that bodies were also manipulated, because we only on the student elections, we only had one option because of the law. And then 2 years ago at Faculty of Political Science, we were like, okay, we will have oppositional student list, and actually we won. And that's why, that is one of the reasons we have the Vice Dean that is so nice, and that is like really telling always the forward, like what should we do. a lot of pressure actually, like the autonomy of university and the budgeting of universities. It was so bad during the protest that we actually at one point we thought that we will not have electricity at our building at Faculty of Political Science and other faculties. But we, of course, in this school year we started with the exams and the courses, so it's a bit better. But like, it's the autonomy is so fragile at this point. The position of professors is so fragile that anything that we do, it's a threat to their existence and to their like pays and livings and stuff like that. So I think we should connect on that and of course create a community. You're right when you say that because of the tragedy we have the community, and on the other hand I'm glad that we have a community, but on the other hand I'm not glad that is the consequences of the tragedy. I think maybe don't wait for the tragedy, connect now. That was our mistake, but like maybe we have time to, I don't know, recover from that.
Make 2 more comments and then we'll have some responses. So,
Went through a long path. Thank you. I don't have a question. I rather have concerns and comparisons. I am from Georgia, and I cannot not say anything. I don't know how much aware you are, aware of the situation you are there. So while you were discussing where the protest starts from and around what and who is protesting, the universities, in our case, the students started protesting, and the others. So it was particularly one university students who decided to stay overnight, and the protest was followed after our prime minister said that they are halting the negotiations. They are not going to start negotiations to European Union regarding Georgia's future membership. Georgia at the moment has candidacy status, and so this prime minister announced this on exactly 1 year ago, on November 28, and that sparked the wave of protests. And the universities have been main hub, the more liberal universities, where some universities turned out to be the administrative part of them turned out to be quite under, like, for example, this prime minister himself teaches in that university that I'm thinking about. So not all of them, but some of them are very outspoken. And the main core of the protest, and by the way, interesting fact is that every single day since November 2024, and we just celebrated 3 days ago on the Deák Square, the Georgian students, the anniversary of every single day. It's not like weekly protest, it's everyday protest. And I know people, like one of them is also a university professor, she's there every evening. Like after the university, she has private classes and she works as a translator. And then at the end, she has to be there. She has not missed maybe more than 1 week in the whole year. It's like another job because it's so existential because the threat is that because the government is cutting all the ties with Europe. It's the Kremlin agenda, we all know this. And it's so existential that I see my professors on the street, the core of the protest, who's standing. So it's not like 100,000 people every day, of course, because initially there were it was more than 200,000, it was 200, up to 300,000 the first few days. And now there is around from, let's say, 200 to 300 that there was like in the hardest cold or like in the summer days, like every day, the least active days are around 200 people. And these people are mostly the writers, the scholars, scientists. So mostly this is the part of the society who stands there. And as I said, I don't have a question, but but for Georgia, this is more integrated, and because I think it's more existential comparing to Hungary, because Hungary is still part of the European Union, and we are in Georgian case, it's this existentialness of this crisis. I think encouraged or like made people go and protest so much. And just yesterday, I don't know who was posting, it was some Ukrainian media saying that this is longest consecutive everyday protest in the European history, in the modern, in the European history. So this is a Georgian way, just for. Thank you.
Great. I mean, we've had some perspectives from Serbia, Georgia, Romania, Germany. Julius. I'm out of breath now. There you go.
Thank you. I'm Julius Rostas, and I have 2 comments and a question to you. One very short about CEU. I was affiliated with CEU for some years, and forward looking to your recommendations, I will stress the importance to build connection between the university and the society at large. CEU failed, among many other things, because it was so disconnected from what was going on in Budapest and in Hungary that, you cannot believe. Yeah. So, for example, at that time I was part of the university management, heads of departments and rector and the pro-rector. And the impression of my Hungarian colleagues was that CEU is the university of the poor. And I laughed like, I said, people, really? Go talk to some Hungarian students. I was lucky enough because with Andrew, we taught at Corvinus before and so on, and I had other interaction with Hungarian students. And I laughed so much, realizing that they are completely from another planet. CEU, University of the Poor. Plus, there were 80,000, 100,000 people in the street. And the rector of CEU, people were passing by CEU, didn't have the guts to go out and to say, thank you, we are going to fight. CEU was a small entity with huge resources, and they could afford to fight, and there was no fight. So how can you change something with this? But coming back, building the community, it's really important also for the outreach of the university, because I just happen to know that, for example, in Rotterdam, out of a generation from a high school from Budapest, 12 ended up in the University of Rotterdam. So it's a competition also to get students in. So by building this and educating the people about the changes and so on, it's really crucial. It helps to look comparatively, and thank you to the Georgian colleague, because in a way, gave us it's bad here, but it can be worse. It's that kind of situation. But I put together with 2 other colleagues for 3 years a special issue of the journal Sociology, looking at attacks on sociology. But everywhere, looking all over the world, how this is attacked as part of the academic freedom. And that goes also in US. Now with Trump, we know much better. Goes also in the UK, how the commodification affects the well-being of academics and how they write about certain subjects and how they cannot write about some because they do not have time, everything being about money and how much you bring to the university. And then last but not least, in Germany. Germany, everybody has the impression that, great country. Now, in the past 2 years after, since the war in Gaza, there is a limitation, especially by the government, but also different other entities, of the academic freedom in German universities that one cannot imagine yeah, when top scholars like Nancy Fraser and others, yeah, are completely cancelled just because there is some criticism of the Israeli government, yeah, actions related or not to Gaza, but also just if you want to do a talk anywhere in Germany and you put the word Palestine, then, you know, no chance. For sure, you know, you have no chance to do that. So academic freedom comes under attack everywhere, and you said it's a global, yeah, dynamic, and it's good to look beyond authoritarianism, yeah, and to learn from that, because it will come also here. Let's be optimistic after April, but it will come after that as well. So let's not dream. But my question to you, Zoltán, I think, did I get it wrong? Because you were implying, at least this is what I understood, that that foundation should be, you know, the appointments in the board of the foundation that manages the budget for the higher education, you know, should be transparent and so on. Was I getting right? Because to me, it's a nonsense to have a foundation, another layer in the administration between the government and the universities. To me, it makes no sense to have a foundation. It should be, you know, directly between the ministry and these institutions, you know, the budget and all these issues. Thank you.
Any other points or questions? If not, let's have a few, I think, closing comments and responses to the questions. So chance for the panel, respond to the questions, and if you'd like to make a kind of summing up. Oh, yeah.
Just to, I forgot because I had to mention this, I forgot how far it can go. Georgian government initiated the education system change, even though it's really intense situation and they are under very heated criticism from the West for all of these processes and all of these authoritarian moves. They are very, I mean, they don't have time. They should not have time to attack at the moment the academia, but it is so important for their power to dismantle the whole system that they found time and they came up with a new initiation. It's called One City, One Faculty, and there will be one faculty only per city. And this faculty cannot be, this is, I don't know what this is, really. It's unimaginable. What is happening in Georgia? Georgia was not always like this. I don't know how much you know about it, but it is shocking, really. It's like, it's some kind of fantasy we are living in. Thank you.
So, yes, and I have to answer the question. So, yes, it is crazy because this kind of model change universities which that are maintained by these kind of foundations, according to the law, they are not state universities anymore. They are private universities, but they are not. They are pseudo private university or so-called private universities. So according to the law, they are. So if you check the Higher Education Act, they are listed as a private universities, but they are not. Probably more or less Corvinus behaves like a private university because Corvinus has a huge property in 3 state-related companies, partly state-related, but the other model change universities financed by the state. More, and no one knows it, well, not no one, but very few people knows it, that there is a national finance ministry registration every year where they listed all the state-related or state-financed organizations, all of them. This is an EU requirement, yes. And these, all the model change universities and all the foundations, so both, are listed as a state-related, state-financed organization, officially. Yes, but it is not a ministerial decree, it is just a ministerial, not even not a, so something, a very not legal tool, but it's an evidence that they are state universities. So it's a cheating. No, but it's a Hungaricum. So if you check the Hungarian legal system, there are lots of tricks. You can see that something is like that, but in the reality, it's a totally opposite. So I don't want to say the final word. Did I? Okay. So yes, thank you for your interest. I think if you mention Georgia and how far can the government go, I think everywhere. So look at the United States. In 2024, I had a presentation in Miami, and I said the US colleagues compared the Florida legislation and Hungarian legislation and said, be careful, if Trump came, you will face like in Hungary. They said no chance, US the US. And when I met them in 2025, so this year, spring, they said, oh my God, we always mention you because you are right. So, you know, be careful, be aware of academic freedom, the importance of academic freedom, share this value, its importance, and help the colleagues, your friends who are not related to academia to understand why is it important. I guess it's very
good. Maybe just a small thought on the CU but yeah, I feel guilty now. It was such nice final words, so maybe cut it from the recording. So about the CU, just one example from Eastern Northern Hungary. We organized with a colleague of mine a protest for the CU back then in Miskolc. And I had, as a speaker as well, I had a very hard time to draft my speech because I had to think about how do you explain to Miskolc people that for them CU is important? To people who never, many of them never heard of the CU, maybe from governmental propaganda, never saw CU people in Miskolc advocating for, I don't know, local minority, local Roma people or something like that. No one from CU. And we had like 200 participants. And part of it is, and this is the off Budapest reality, that if you want to resist and you want to have a protest off Budapest, at an off Budapest site, you are in a much more threatening situation. Less people are on the streets, it's more easy for local municipality and political power to identify you, and people are much more afraid of the consequences of participation. So back then, for example, we had a speaker from the local theater who at the very last minute withdrew from speaking up, and it turned out that he's afraid of speaking up. And so partially the reason of 200 people is this fear, which is much more a problem in non-Budapest locations. But I think, and this is my key message here, I think he was super right that it was unclear for people of Hungary why CEU is important to save it. It has never been explained to them, and CEU did not stand up for many of them, and they did not feel that it's their own cause. So I think in Miskolc, those 200 people, the root cause was also that local people just didn't feel that it's their cause and they should go on the square and protest for the CEU. So once again, yeah, it's our mission to advocate and communicate to people why academic freedom is important in general for the whole population and not just for us in our little hub. Thanks.
Great. Well, I mean, I've been to an awful lot of seminars on academic freedom, and this was one of the best in my mind. It had everything, and passion and emotion, which this subject should have. And I've got to live with your words over the holidays because I'm writing the chapter in the book on academic freedom, and Balázs will be joining me in this endeavor. So we'll be listening and thinking about your thoughts and words, and it would be great if at some point we could share the draft chapter with you, because we do very much value and respect your opinion and your commitment to academic freedom. and you have spoken out and made a very valuable stand. And I think also this video is going to live on for a few years because we have, because of Krista, one of the few academic courses on academic freedom anywhere in the world, I suspect. And I'm sure this video is going to become part of that syllabus and live on into the future. So thank you very, very much. Next week, we are discussing Hungarian identity. And we're going to start a bit earlier at about 4:30, but all of those registered for the course will be sent information, and we will put it on in our Facebook groups as well. So keep in contact, keep coming to the seminars. Thank you very much, everybody. Give yourself a round of applause.